Hey, I'm tripping, I'm sliding, I'm riding through the back like fuck. Bust that horn up.
Hey team, we are back for part 2 of the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl analysis because I missed a lot of details in the first video and I also didn't want it to be like an hour long. So here is part 2 with some of the details I didn't include with some help from the comment section. First off, before we get started, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who watched the first video and dropped their own takes. You caught the symbolism I didn't, and you guys showed up in the comment section for this one. So just know that I see you and I appreciate you. Thank you for bringing all of these important details to light. Quick flex, but for context, I have a communications degree and have been working in advertising for over 10 years. So analyzing media like this is something that I really love doing and I'm really passionate about, especially when it carries a deeper message. Before we dive in, please do me a solid, hit that like button and that subscribe button if you enjoy this breakdown. It really helps this channel a lot. And please drop a comment with your favorite detail or theory because I really love going into the comment section and reading your comments and hearing about what you think as well, and also opening myself up to be educated on things that I don't know that much about. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Also, in honor of part 2, my partner made this really sick Kendrick Not Like Us inspired beat just for you guys. So if you like it, check out his channel Champlu for more beats that you can use. Disclaimer, all of this is just my own opinion, speculation, and research. It is by no means a definitive account of what Kendrick actually meant behind the performance. Enough intro, let's get into it. So first off, we have the PlayStation controller set up at the start of the performance. Now, if you caught the Squid Game reference, you're already ahead of most people. The game-like setup, the giant PlayStation symbols, it all ties into the idea that life is a rigged system, especially for Black people. Now, Hwang Dong-hyuk's Squid Game was literally about exactly that. A brutal, high-stakes game where the rich profit off people at the lowest rungs of society, fighting for survival or for the entertainment of the ruling class. Now, let's take that imagery and place it on an NFL field, a space controlled by billionaire owners, most of them white, most of them conservative, and in some cases, literal Trump supporters. And then there's Donald Trump himself, whose presence looms over this league as an extension of his power, his values, and his America. The message? The system is designed to entertain the wealthy at the expense of the players. And if that sounds familiar, it's because Colin Kaepernick already laid this out in his Netflix series, Colin in Black and White. In the series, he makes a striking comparison. He likens the NFL draft to a slave auction. The way young Black men, many of them coming from poor backgrounds, are lined up, measured, examined, and prodded before being chosen and bought by team owners. It's disturbingly similar to how enslaved Africans were inspected on the auction block. The wealthiest men in the room control their futures, their contracts, their worth. The second these players step out of line, the system reminds them exactly who has the power. Think about what happened to Colin Kaepernick himself. He took a knee to protest police brutality, a silent, peaceful demonstration against the unjust killing of Black people, and what did the NFL do? They effectively blackballed him from the league. No team would touch him. A Super Bowl caliber quarterback, gone, erased. And for what? For stepping out of his assigned role, for daring to challenge the system that profits off of his body but doesn't care about his rights. That's the underlying tension Kendrick is playing with here. The Squid Game setup, the prison yard aesthetic, it's all connected to this bigger commentary on power, control, and exploitation. The NFL isn't just a game. It's a machine that chews up Black talent and spits it out when it's no longer convenient. And that brings me on to the next bit of symbolism that you can infer here. The field itself was set up to look like a prison yard. Again, because the NFL has long been compared to modern day slavery, like the industrial prison complex. Look it up, it's a great rabbit hole. A lot of people, including myself, missed the prison-like uniforms that the dancers were wearing. And then when you look at the female dancers, it gets really interesting because usually at events like this, women are in hypersexualized outfits, tight bodysuits, short skirts, heels. But here, the performers were fully covered. Loose pants, no flashy skin-tight fabric. And this is because Kendrick is stripping away the usual distractions. He's forcing us to focus on something deeper, something more important than just entertainment. Then we get to the choreography. So the dancers are circling around this circle button, a move that is a nod to nose to the grindstone. They're going in circles, blindly following each other. And this shows that endless cycle of survival, of routine, and being trapped in a system that isn't built for you to win. It's the perfect way to set the tone for the rest of the performance, because before Kendrick even opens his mouth, we're already in the middle of a message about oppression, control, and the illusion of choice. And that's just the beginning. I wanted to go back to this right time, wrong guy line.
The revolution about to be televised. You picked the right time, but the wrong guy.
Which feels like classic Kendrick, layered, sharp, and meant to hit on multiple levels. Now, there's a few different meanings to this one. On the surface, Kendrick could be talking about himself, the wrong guy for a sanitized, feel-good halftime show. The NFL picked Kendrick, but they got the version of him that tells the truth. Not what they wanted to hear. They got an artist who would turn one of the world's biggest stages into a protest rather than a spectacle. But when you zoom out, it feels even bigger, because with Trump sitting in the audience, this line could also be a direct shot at him. When you look at right time, a time when America desperately needs unity, justice, and real leadership. Wrong guy, a leader who has stoked division, embraced white supremacy, and ignored the struggles of Black and marginalized communities, and done a lot worse, to be honest. This would be Kendrick's warning to America. You picked the wrong guy before, and look where it's gotten you. If you don't change course, the game really will be over. And in just one line, Kendrick takes out two systems at once. The NFL for trying to profit from Black culture while suppressing Black voices, and America for choosing power over justice and division over unity. It's a line that hits on every level, personal, political, and cultural, just like Kendrick always does. Next, I want to take a closer look at Uncle Ruckus over here. Samuel Jackson's role is even more significant when you realize that he has a deep history as an activist and supporter of the Black Panther Party. He even worked with Martin Luther King Jr. He spent his whole life fighting against the system that Kendrick raps about. Samuel's life has been defined by standing up to injustice and white supremacy, making his participation more than just a celebrity cameo. It was the passing of a torch from one generation of Black resistance to the next. Now, I didn't actually go into this in the first video because I thought that it was pretty common knowledge, but I know Uncle Sam from World War II American war propaganda. Uncle Sam is a personification of the US government and was a big propaganda instrument during World War II. Originally popularized during World War I, the famous I Want You US Army poster by artist James Montgomery Flagg became one of the most recognizable recruitment tools in American history. The image of the stern finger-pointing Uncle Sam was designed to evoke a personal sense of duty and patriotism, pressuring young men to enlist into the army. This use of direct address, I want you, is a classic propaganda technique, making the audience feel individually called to action. Now, Uncle Sam remained a potent symbol during World War II, representing the draft and rallying support for the war effort. Now, during this time, propaganda was everywhere. Posters, radio, films, urging Americans to buy war bonds, conserve resources, and support the troops. Now, Uncle Sam, with his top hat and his patriotic colors, became shorthand for the government's demands and expectations of its citizens. Uncle Sam's influence also extends beyond just wartime. Over the decades, he's been used in campaigns about everything from taxes to public health, always representing the voice of authority. So when Kendrick invokes symbols like Uncle Sam, he's tapping into that rich history of propaganda and power, reminding us that the same symbols used to promote war and patriotism can also be flipped to challenge authority and expose injustice. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was Kendrick Lamar's outfit and symbolism. With Kendrick, nothing is just fashion. Everything he wears means something. So let's start with his black Letterman jacket. On the front, stitched in white, was Gloria, a reference to his song Gloria featuring SZA, which is a bop and one of my favorite songs on the album. A song about faith, perseverance, and the power of divine guidance. Kendrick's entire career has been laced with themes of spirituality and struggle, and Gloria ties into that, acknowledging the higher forces that play in his journey. Turn to the back of the jacket and we see PG Lang, his creative company, the independent brand he and Dave Free started to break free from the traditional constraints of the music industry. It represents artistic liberation, a rejection of the industry's rigid structures, and a new way of storytelling. Beneath that, we see Compton, a reminder of his roots. No matter how global he becomes, Kendrick's music and the message always start with where he came from. And then there's the bold A necklace, the part of the outfit that had everyone speculating like crazy. Some people thought it stood for Angela Davis, Davis, the revolutionary activist known for her radical fight for Black liberation. Other people tied it to Africa with a K, a nod to his deep connection with Black ancestry and Pan-African pride. I think the most likely reference is a reference to A minor, the infamous line in Not Like Us, because the A is not a capital A, but a lowercase a, as in A minor. And then there were the bell-bottom flared jeans, an interesting and subtle choice. Now, flared jeans carry a lot of historical weight, especially for Black and countercultural movements. In the 1960s and 70s, Black activists and artists thrifted and wore flared jeans as an act of rebellion. It was about rejecting mainstream capitalism, embracing secondhand fashion, and celebrating newfound freedoms in self-expression. But it goes even deeper. Bell-bottoms were also a staple of anti-Vietnam War protests worn by young activists who were rejecting American imperialism, calling out the senseless violence of war and standing against their own government's actions. Given the current global climate, especially the ongoing genocide in Gaza, this could be a subtle nod to the US's long history of militarism and exploitation. Kendrick is known for weaving in layered politically charged imagery, often without directly naming it, and this could be his way of drawing a historical parallel. Just as people in the 60s protested America's role in Vietnam, we are now witnessing resistance against modern-day imperialism and the violence inflicted on marginalized communities worldwide. But wait, there's even more. Kendrick wore a jacket by Martine Rose, a renowned designer of Jamaican descent. This choice was also more than a fashion statement. It was a nod to the Jamaican influence on Black music and culture, from reggae to hip-hop. He's also supporting Black designers on one of the world's biggest stages, and it also reinforces this idea of global Black solidarity, connecting his Compton roots to the broader Black diaspora. Now, while we're on the topic of the diaspora, I wanted to acknowledge that I am not African American. I deeply believe that the experiences of Black people across the diaspora are profoundly connected, because colonialism, exploitation, and racism were global systems. So our fight for liberation must also be global too. I always strive to understand the struggles of Black communities worldwide because our oppressions are intertwined. Whether it's the fight against police violence in America, land dispossession in Africa, or anti-Blackness in the Caribbean and Europe, these battles stem from the same root: white supremacy and colonialism. That's why diasporic solidarity matters. And if we stand together, share our stories, and fight as one, we become an unstoppable force. Because Black liberation anywhere strengthens Black liberation everywhere. Now back to scheduled programming. Now, SZA's halftime outfit also made its own cultural statement. She rocked a one-of-a-kind crybaby leather jacket from Born X-Raised, paired with a fully LA-based fit. Born X-Raised, founded by the late Chris Spanto Print-Up, is deeply rooted in LA street culture, representing the heart and soul of the city. Spanto, who was of Apache and Seneca descent, infused his indigenous heritage into the brand's ethos, making it a symbol of community, culture, and resistance. Now, the dancers joining SZA on stage were also wearing Born X-Raised work shirts, which amplified this tribute, turning the stage into a celebration of LA pride and indigenous acknowledgement. But there's also been a bit of controversy around this brand too, because since Spanto's passing in 2023, some people have questioned whether the brand still honors its founder's values, and they argue that the brand risks losing its authenticity and community-first spirit without his guiding hand. Now, I also wanted to talk about the color red and how that choice is also quite deliberate. Red holds deep meaning in indigenous culture. It's the color of life, but it's also the color of loss, of blood spilt, and of ancestors who fought and sacrificed. It's often worn to honor missing and murdered indigenous women, a cause that hits hard in Native communities today. And knowing that Born X-Raised was built on the heritage of its founder, Chris Spanto Print-Up, who was Apache and Seneca, that red feels even more powerful. It was a really thoughtful touch to add this element to the performance, because America was built off of not just the backs of African slaves, but also the bloodshed and the atrocities that were committed against indigenous people in the name of building the America that we know today, that quite honestly doesn't get talked about quite as much as it should. Okay, now first things first, I know I butchered the pronunciation of Buick the first time, but this time I am bringing in some reinforcements, somebody who actually can drive and knows more about cars than I do, my boyfriend.
Guess I'm in the video now.
To talk about the significance of the Buick in this performance and as it relates to Kendrick Lamar.
One of the most visually striking moments in the performance was the influx of dancers tumbling out of the Buick. Like some kind of clown car, this wasn't just for dramatic effect. It was a powerful symbol of the current state of America. Right now, the US is seen as a joke on the global stage. From political chaos to economic struggles and its handling of social issues, the image of people piling out of a car in an absurd, exaggerated way plays into that perception. It suggests overcrowding, disorder, and a system that barely functions but keeps going anyway. Back to the Buick. This isn't just a car. It's a loaded symbol of American history, indigenous erasure, and Kendrick's ongoing rivalry with Drake. But let's just be real for a second. We all know that's over now, right? We can agree that's over now. Yeah. First, the name Buick itself comes from the Buick people, an indigenous group from what is now Michigan, whose presence was largely erased through colonization. So before we even talk about the car itself, Kendrick is already making a deeper statement about how America takes, renames, and profits off what it's erased. Now, this ain't just no normal Buick. This is a GNX. One of the greatest muscle cars ever built. A true sleeper. It didn't look like much, but when put in a race, it outran Ferraris of its time. And this is where Kendrick gets petty and brilliant. Because the founder of Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari, was nicknamed The Drake. But yo, what does that mean? It means Kendrick literally pulled up in a GNX to tell Drake, I may not be as flashy, but when it comes to real power, I win. Now Drake, with his luxury branding and his industry dominance, is the Ferrari. Polished, expensive, and expected to be the best. But Kendrick, man, he's the GNX. Unassuming, but when it's time to actually perform, he smokes them. So when the Buick GNX rolls in, it's not just a cool vintage aesthetic, it's Kendrick planting his flag in hip-hop's biggest rivalry, letting everybody know when it comes to skill, impact, longevity, he's built different.
Now let's move on to this scene. At a first glance, they may just look like backup performers, but in true Kendrick fashion, everything means something. These dancers are dressed in white, which could be symbolizing that they are angels, spirits of the fallen, standing behind Kendrick as he delivers his message. Kendrick's performance featuring men in white symbolizing lost black men underscores a harsh reality. Gun violence disproportionately affects black Americans within the hip-hop community. Now, the leading cause of death for black Americans since 2020 has been gun violence. Now, when you look at the homicide rates, in 2021, black males experienced the highest firearm-related homicide rate at 52.9 deaths per 100,000 people, significantly higher than other racial groups. Then when you cross over into hip-hop, the hip-hop community has also suffered some pretty big losses due to gun violence. First up, we have Tupac, who was fatally shot in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. Then we have the notorious B.I.G., murdered in a drive-by shooting in LA. Then we have Nipsey Hussle in 2019, respected artist and community activist, shot outside his store in Los Angeles. More recently, we have Takeoff, who was a member of the rap group Migos, who was fatally shot in Houston. Now, these are by no means all of the losses, just some of the ones that I wanted to call out to illustrate this point. These tragedies highlight the urgent need to address gun violence, particularly its impact on black communities and artists. Now, this moment also connects deeply to Kendrick's long-standing themes of survival, trauma, and legacy. From All Right to Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, which is actually my favorite Kendrick song. He's always spoken about the weight of black death in America. And here, he brings it to the Super Bowl stage, a place usually reserved for an empty spectacle. Instead, he forces the audience to see the ghosts that America tries to forget. Another thing I missed in this part is one of the most chilling and powerful moments of Kendrick's performance, when all the dancers lie flat on the ground, evoking the image of chalk outlines on the pavement, a haunting symbol of black lives lost to violence, police brutality, and systemic injustice. Now, this moment was a stark reminder of the reality behind the headlines. The bodies of black men and women left in the streets after being killed by police, like Michael Brown, whose body lay on the pavement for over 4 hours in Ferguson. The victims of gang violence, mass shootings, and hate crimes, a cycle of violence that targets black communities and leaves black families broken. The erasure of humanity, because too often often these victims become statistics rather than stories, and the way they get presented in the media often shows them as criminal stereotypes rather than giving them the humanity that they deserve. By having these dancers form these living outlines, Kendrick forces the audience to confront a truth that America tries to look away from. Everybody on that field represents a life cut short. Everybody is a statement of loss, grief, and injustice. But there is also another theory floating around this part of the performance. This moment was layered with symbolism that could be a calculated jab at Drake, tying into the controversy surrounding XXXTentacion's murder. So let's break it down. During Peekaboo, Kendrick moves to the X button on the PlayStation style field. Just before this, Uncle Sam announces "deduct one life," adding an ominous and deliberate touch. During this performance, Kendrick brings out two of Drake's exes, SZA and Serena Williams, stacking up the tension. And now this could be the third X, positioned on the 30-yard line, symbolizing a total of 3 X's. Now, I had to do a lot of research into American football to really piece this together, okay, guys? So, pat on the back for me. Why is this significant? XXXTentacion had previously accused Drake of being involved in his murder, even saying, "If I die, it was Drake." The presence of these 3 X's feels too intentional to be a coincidence. 2 X's, 1 X, 3 strikes. This could be Kendrick's way of adding a dark symbolic body to the lyrical war. A bold move implying that in this beef, he is not just ending Drake's reputation, he's counting the bodies. In classic Kendrick style, it's a diss wrapped in layered storytelling, leaving the audience to decode the subtext of rivalry, violence, and the consequences. So next up, we have the American flag being split in 2 during Kendrick's performance. Now, this had a lot of different layers of meaning, some that I missed in the first video. Now, first off, we have coast to coast division. Some people saw this as a nod to the divide between the East and the West Coasts, a rivalry deeply embedded in hip-hop culture, dating back to the days of Tupac and Biggie. Kendrick is a West Coast icon and has always represented his coast while pushing for unity over division within the culture. Now, there is also the red versus blue to symbolize a divided America, a country so fractured that even its symbol of unity, the American flag, is split apart. At Super Bowl, a deeply American event, Kendrick brings the nation's inner turmoil front and center. And then we have perhaps the most powerful interpretation of how the flag itself was formed by the dancers' bodies. The dancers' hands on each other's backs reminds us that America was built on the backs of Black people. From slavery to sharecropping to prison labor to the exploitation of Black athletes and entertainers, the stars and stripes, a symbol of freedom, rest on a foundation of struggle, pain, and sacrifice. Now, this split flag isn't just about division, it's also about whose labor built the very fabric of America and how the labor has been exploited and erased. In one image, Kendrick captures the fractures in America geographically, politically, and racially, while honoring the people who've held the country together despite it all. So next, I wanted to move on to Serena Williams and her appearance in this performance. So quick correction from my first video. I originally said that Serena performed this at Wimbledon, but it was actually from the London Olympics. I got confused because I saw Serena playing tennis in my mind and immediately thought that it was Wimbledon. But let's talk about that moment, the dance that had everyone talking. Because after her gold medal win, Serena broke out into a dance once known as the Crip Walk, a move with deep roots in LA street culture and the Crips gang. The origins of the dance are a little fuzzy, but some of the earliest footage dates back to the 1940s with a Harlem dance legend called Henry Crip Hurd. This man was incredible. He was a double amputee who danced with and without crutches, turning what some might seem as a limitation into straight up art. But beyond his moves, Henry was about power. He took the word Crip, a term meant to mock people with disabilities, and flipped it into his legend. Fast forward to the 1970s and the Crip Walk takes on a new meaning. The dance got picked up by the Crips and members used it to spell out their set or row signs without even saying a word. And one of the key figures in shaping the dance that we know today is called Robert Sugar Bear Jackson, a first-generation Crip. But if you're wondering how it blew up worldwide, well, you can thank Uncle Snoop for that, even though some of us don't like him anymore because he is dancing for Mr. Trump. But when Snoop Dogg hit the walk in his Drop It Like It's Hot video back in 2004, boom, the world was officially hooked. Another really similar and powerful moment in the 1968 Olympics that was held in the Olympic medal ceremony in Mexico City, where John Carlos raised his fist in protest against racism and injustice. So there is a long history of these kind of statements being made at these kind of games. Also, something I missed in the first video, in the symbolism around the American flag, there are no white stars. All the white stars are missing. And if you know Kendrick, you know that nothing is accidental. The stars represent the 50 states, so their complete absence signals a fractured nation, divided politically, socially, and racially. There's even more to this. The stars weren't just gone, they were white stars, a symbol Kendrick might be using to say white America is absent from the fight for justice. It's a call out to a system that denies black people the very promises this flag claims to uphold. Next, I wanted to move on to the appearance of the Palestinian and Sudanese flags. I didn't initially include this in the first video because I wasn't sure if this was meant to be part of the performance, but I think it is important to mention. So as the performance reached its climax, we saw the Palestinian and the Sudanese flags raised, which is a clear symbol of solidarity with oppressed people around the world, from Gaza to Sudan to Congo. In a time of heightened global tension, Kendrick brought these struggles to the world's biggest stage, demanding that we see them, acknowledge them, and stand with them. Now, this was a direct challenge to US imperialism and America's role in global conflicts. Now, I wanted to talk about the dancer or the background performer who actually raised this flag. Now, his name is Zulkarnain. So he is a 41-year-old field cast member, and he unfurled the flag with Sudan and Gaza written on it. Now, also as someone who has my name pronounced wrong all the time, shout out to all the difficult to pronounce African names, let's go into what his name actually means because it's pretty cool. Now, it comes from an Arabic word where Du al-Qarnayn means the professor of two horns, a legendary figure known for his journeys and justice. Now, Zulkarnain later told NBC News that he had been accepted to the field cast a month earlier, and he used his moment on the world stage to make a personal statement of solidarity. And the timing was pretty great, especially in front of President Donald Trump, a figure deeply tied to US foreign policy and military interventions, making the protest even more powerful. Now, something I absolutely had to mention and clarify is the 40 acres and a mule reference, which comes from a post-Civil War promise to provide freed African Americans with land for economic independence. In 1865, Union General William T. Sherman issued Special Field Order No. 15, granting formerly enslaved families up to 40 acres of confiscated Confederate land. Although mules weren't part of the order, the Union Army later provided some settlers with some surplus mules, giving rise to the phrase. However, after Lincoln's assassination, President Andrew Johnson reversed the order, returning land to former white owners and displacing many black settlers. This broken promise denied generations of African Americans the chance to build wealth, fueling calls for reparations today, even though American white slave owners were compensated for losing their slaves. Is that not the craziest thing that you've heard? Now, the phrase has since become a symbol of racial injustice in pop culture, with filmmaker Spike Lee, love him, naming his company 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks. And Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl reference continues the conversation on inequality and unfulfilled reparations. I also wanted to go into the Bloods and the Crips reference. Kendrick Lamar has long spoken about gang culture in LA, but more importantly, he's emphasized unity between the Bloods and the Crips, the two most infamous gangs associated with red and blue. During his performance, the red and blue color themes were not just aesthetic choices, they were a reminder of the 1992 truce between the Bloods and the Crips that followed the LA riots, sparked by the Rodney King beating. Now, the 1992 peace treaty was a historic moment, an unprecedented moment, where both gangs came together to end violence within their communities, a symbol of unity, not rivalry. I actually encourage you guys to look into this because it's really interesting. Kendrick has addressed addressed this before, especially on songs like Mad City and Dying of Thirst, where he explores the trauma of growing up surrounded by gang violence and how the real enemy isn't each other, it's the system that creates these conditions. Kendrick is known for using his platform to expose injustice, and also recently has been linked to a documentary exposing child sex trafficking, although I won't talk too much about that because it is just rumors. But he has used his platform to turn the spectacle of the halftime show into a call out to this injustice, which honestly deserves more attention. Okay, so I didn't think that this video was going to be as long as the last one, but wow, the symbolism is pretty potent. Kendrick didn't water anything down. He used one of the biggest stages in America to highlight Black struggles, celebrate Black culture, and confront Black trauma, unfiltered and unapologetic. It was a performance that blended personal narrative, social commentary, and raw artistry, proving once again why Kendrick is more than just a rapper. He is a storyteller, a poet, and a cultural critic. And when the screen flashed game over, Kendrick was not just ending the performance, he was ending the illusion. No more pretending, no more forgetting, no more silence. Because the real game, the fight for justice, never ends.